UFL trying to skew the playoff system so St. Louis gets in for a home game? Well, we've got some interesting developing news courtesy of James Larson with Pro Football Newsroom. This story comes to us from him, and it's very weird. Let me put it this way. The UFL is always looking for ways to innovate and shake things up in spring football ecosystem. Last week, the league attempted to make a change that would have greatly shifted the structure of the UFL. According to multiple league sources, UFL proposed the idea of changing the playoff format midway through the season, which is a terrible idea. This really reminds me of USFL and how they would change things mid-season. Those type of things do not go very well for the players, for the CBA, which we'll have a separate video on the CBA agreement later today. But overall, this is so weird. Right after week 5, this new idea was introduced to the league and its coaches. Division winners, USFL, XFL conference, make playoffs. Next 2 teams make playoffs based off overall record. So basically, the number 1 teams in each division would make it, and then the remaining teams would essentially make it under them. This new format would mean that 3 teams from the XFL or USFL conference could make a postseason run, rather than it being the traditional 2 teams per division. Following Week 5's slate of action, this new format would have allowed for 3 XFL teams to be in the playoff seeding. St. Louis and Michigan both sat at 3 and 2, and the Battlehawks hold the head-to-head advantage, having taken down the Panthers in Week 5. However, this proposal from the UFL fell on deaf ears. Across the league, coaches, players, personnel, etc., all voiced their displeasure with the idea, and it has since been shut down. According to multiple sources, the UFL will be sticking with the original playoff format, the top 2 teams from the USFL and XFL conferences. Generally speaking, the idea in and of itself isn't a horrible idea. We've seen times past in spring football where teams have been robbed of playoff opportunities. For example, in the XFL in 2023, the St. Louis Battlehawks were 7-3, but the Arlington Renegades were 4-6, and they made the playoffs, as Arlington was the 2nd seed in the XFL South, while St. Louis was the 3rd seed in the XFL North. The USFL also saw this take place in 2023. The entire USFL South Division had better records than the USFL North teams, but the traditional playoff formatting allowed for 2 USFL North teams to make the postseason. However, to introduce this potential change midway through the UFL season is rather strange. It certainly feels like the UFL is pushing for St. Louis to make the playoffs no matter what. Obviously, the Battlehawks being in the postseason would be great for the league with how incredible that fan base is. The UFL has thrived in the Lou, and thankfully, the Battlehawks 4-2 record has them trending towards a playoff berth. That said, folks around the UFL weren't too thrilled with the idea, especially since the motive behind the change was clear: get St. Louis to the playoffs. An anonymous league source told us, "I hope they wouldn't make that change in season, but I wouldn't put it past them. It's crazy, but we can only control what we can control." With that all in mind, this change isn't happening. Let's be clear here. James Larson points out the top 2 teams from the USFL and XFL conferences will battle it out for the UFL Championship trophy this year, beginning in early June. As of right now, the DC Defenders and St. Louis Battlehawks would face off in the XFL Conference Championship. On the USFL side of things, it would be a playoff rematch between Birmingham Stallions and the Michigan Panthers at this point. So, again, this is just crazy talk to me. I cannot believe that this was even proposed, let alone an idea. I get the fact, and we will talk about it in an upcoming video that may be out today with this video, and then a separate video talking about the CBA agreement that will be coming up later today. It has been completed and signed off by the league, so we'll be breaking down the entire coverage of that. But the thing is here, when we take a step back and we really look at the UFL, I have talked about for years how having the playoffs run through St. Louis and how having the championship game with St. Louis be in it is a huge thing. Now, there's definitely no guarantee that the Battlehawks would make it for the championship game, just like we saw last year, where it ended up being the San Antonio Brahmas defeating St. Louis and moving forward to the UFL championship game in St. Louis. So that's my problem here. This is very bizarre and just reeks of just kind of, I don't know. I don't really like this. And again, I stay away from the negative talk on this channel of the league, but this is just out there. This is outrageous to me that this was even proposed. I don't like these type of things happening unless you have some really big scenario coming up where this needs to be done. I don't even think that necessarily it needed to be done in the USFL back in 2023. But again, do it before the end of the season. When the rule book is established, you put it in the rule book at that point. You do not do that prior to or after the season starts, let alone midway through, to just up and change how things work to kind of try to favor one team to, no matter what, get in the playoffs. I think that is just crummy. It just shows like, and again, it'll kind of show a little bit what I've been talking about with attendance and why I really do not think attendance is an issue at this point. But when you read this type of stuff, it kind of reeks of that. Like, hands down, kind of reeks of that type of scenario that they are trying their hardest to get the St. Louis Battlehawks in the playoffs to the championship game because of the fact that they want the biggest attendance for St. Louis, which is just, it's not right. That's not, this league is not fixed. It's not meant to be fixed. And to put a rule halfway through the season and try to introduce that to try to make sure the Battlehawks get in somehow, some way is just weird. And that's the thing too. What's weird to me about that is I don't know how that would ever guarantee that they get the home game. So that's kind of weird to me as well, unless the only thing I could think of is there is some kind of scheduling conflict like we saw last year where Ford Field could not host the playoff game. So no matter what, Michigan Panthers were either, if they were in that home spot in the first place of the USFL conference, they were still playing in Birmingham against the Stallions, no matter if they were the home team or away, because of a scheduling conflict. I hope that's not what happened here, where the UFL is banking on St. Louis being a XFL conference game, because that just at that point you just take away home field advantage at all, and you go to a neutral site at that point for the conference championship game, like Canton, like the USFL did, if you're going to have these type of scheduling conflicts. I don't think that's the case here, but this would lead me to believe something else is going on here. And it's a good thing that folks around the UFL were saying that they didn't want it. And they hope they wouldn't make this change in the season, but I wouldn't put it past them. That's what's scary to think about, that league officials, whether it's Russ Brandon, Daryl Johnston, Danny Garcia, I don't even know if we want to include Dwayne Johnson in this conversation, or like actual Fox Sports executives, Redbird Capital executives. These are more leadership within the league, like Russ Brandon, Daryl Johnston, that would essentially make these type of changes. And it just reeks of like just weird scenario coming up in this time of day when we're now 6 weeks through the season. Clearly, St. Louis looks like they're potentially going to make the playoffs. We don't know at this point if they'll make the home game. That could be DC, and obviously it depends on what Arlington does the rest of the season. But again, let me know in the comments what you think about this. I think this is just crazy talk, and it is kind of leaning a little bit more towards some like very odd behavior from the league. That I'm not really liking that much. This type of stuff just shouldn't go on. If you're going to make a rule, make it before the season and stick to it, unless there is a dire need for that change. Like, for instance, how we saw, I think it was the XFL in 2023 or one of the seasons where they had to implement the emergency third quarterback like Brock Purdy for the 49ers situation that caused them to change rules. I think those are okay, those type of scenarios that you have to do something in order to make sure the game goes on. But in this scenario, I don't like this one. Let me know in the comments what you think. We'll be back later today talking about the new UFL CBA agreement that has officially been signed and is in place, effective today with the UFL and going through the 2026 season. So we'll see you back here on the flip side. Have a great one, everyone.